I'm going to call to order our City of Little Rock Board of Directors agenda meeting from May 28th, 2024, as we set the agenda for June 4th, 2024. Members of the board, we're going to now transition. Is anyone here from ALS? All right, thank you. We'll now transition to the proclamation. Vice Mayor, if you'll join me. As we read the proclamation, whereas ALS, commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a progressive and fatal neurodegenerative condition that disrupts the connection between the brain and muscles, gradually diminishing an individual's ability to walk, talk, eat, and ultimately breathe. Whereas a distressing fact emerges every 90 minutes as someone is diagnosed with ALS and another tragically succumbs to the disease, and the absence of a cure for ALS underscores the pressing need for expanded research and support. And whereas the average life expectancy following ALS diagnosis is a mere 2 to 5 years, underscoring the urgent need for advanced treatments, and whereas ensuring access to innovative therapies, durable medical equipment, and communication technologies is paramount for individuals grappling with ALS. Clinical trials are pivotal in assessing new treatments, improving quality of life, and fostering assistive technologies for ALS patients. And whereas the 10th anniversary of the Ice Bucket Challenge calls for a renewed dedication to raising public awareness and garnering support to propel significant investments in ALS research. And whereas the ALS Association, as the foremost contributor to ALS research globally, has pledged over $154 million to advance more than 550 projects within the United States and 18 other nations. And whereas ALS Awareness Month serves to amplify public understanding of the dire challenges faced by individuals with ALS, recognizing the profound impact this disease has on both the individual and their families and communities, while also acknowledging the ongoing research efforts aimed at eradicating this disease. Now therefore, I, Frank Scott Jr., Mayor of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, do hereby proclaim May 2024 as ALS Awareness Month. Let's give them a round of applause. Brief comments?
I just wanted to thank you so much for recognizing May as Official Awareness Month, and I want you to know that we're working hard to do everything we can to support Arkansans living with ALS. And my mother died of ALS about 30 years ago, but this is my daughter, Anna, and she also is volunteering with the ALS Association. So thank you very much.
We'll now have the Little Rock Marathon after action update.
Hello, how is everybody? Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm gonna move that down. My name is Geneva Lamb, and this is Mike Garrity. We are the Little Rock Marathon staff, and oh good, you have my PowerPoint up. So this year was a dynamite year. People from around the world came to Little Rock, Arkansas. And for those of you that haven't seen this, this is what they came for. And this is about 3 pounds of goodness, and people were very, very, very pleased. The marathon is one of those events. Actually, it's not just one event, it's several different events We have a training program that happens all year long. We have some smaller feeder races that help to promote running and walking and fitness that kind of get people interested in the marathon. So if they're not ready to do the marathon just right yet, then we have a Halloween race and an ugly sweater race that help hopefully get them into the fold. So since we started back in 2003, we've given a little bit of money to Little Rock Parks and Recreation. It's about 1.3 million over the last 22 years. And we have an economic impact of about $3 million each year. The most important thing that I think we keep doing over and over again is that we call them repeat offenders, but they keep doing our race and they bring a friend, and so it's all word of mouth. And somebody that has a great experience at our race, they come back year after year. One of the, we survived COVID like everybody, and what you guys may not know is that we are self-sustaining. We don't take tax dollars, so we have to generate all of our funds ourselves, and that's why we think our mission is important, because we truly love to get back to Little Rock Parks and Recreation, and we think we are making significant strides little by little every year. But we survived COVID, and so our numbers are coming back. We probably, I think one of the next slides will show some of the numbers that we have. Oh, yeah, they don't let me operate that. Nope.
Angie, can you put it on the summary slide? Yellow tab.
There you go. I think it's a yellow slide. There we go. All right, so we've had an increase, and which is great for us. Typically, I like to see us have a 10% increase in participation every year. We have people from all 50 states, 9 different countries. The average, when we did all of the calculations, the average participant traveled 218 miles, which is, I think, pretty important because we're putting heads in beds. And let's see, there was one statistic that I think is real important. So 35% of our participant base is from outside of Arkansas. And so that means that 75%, about 74% comes from outside of the area, so about 80 miles. And that means that the people are coming and staying and spending, having a good time, and then telling their friends, and they're coming back year after year. So, Mike, did you want to add anything? That's about it. Short, sweet, and to the point.
Thank you so much for all your hard work.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate you. Director Phillips? Miller?
I'm sorry.
I don't see his hand.
I should have raised I'm sorry, Mayor. I'm curious, how many people does it take to put on the marathon? Because I've seen people at each intersection, or people are running through, and I know they're not all volunteers, but quite frankly, how many people does it take to put it on?
So for the marathon, on Sunday, we have a marathon and a half marathon, and a 5K and a 10K on Saturday. In between those 4 races, there are 386 intersections that we have to staff. So we use Little Rock Police Department, and then we have a private security firm we use to staff each of those intersections. Then we have 15 different aid stations along the course, and each of those are volunteer groups, and there's 10 to 20 per each of those groups. All told, on the weekend and the week leading up to the race, we have about 2,000 volunteers that help out. And then it's Little Rock Police. We have, I believe it's 190 police officers we use from Little Rock. There's an additional 15 or 20 from North Little Rock, because we do run a little bit over in North Little Rock. And then it's another about 180 private security staff we use throughout the weekend. We have a volunteer committee of about 35 that meet all year round that help us out, and they kind of lead the different areas. But then on race weekend, those committees grow to larger numbers. So we have course operations staff that we give a little stipend to, that kind of are eyes and ears and troubleshooters out on the course, in addition to Little Rock Fire Department, MIMS, Public Works has people out on there on the course helping us out as well. So it's a whole city effort. All the city departments are involved. So it's a whole city effort to put this on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, members of the board, I want to ask that Ms. Gina Gamberling and her team bring the SFA individuals as well as Leland Couch. And before you get started, I'll try to bring it around and get the ball to you. First and foremost, members of the city board, as you are aware, that the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau oftentimes partners with the city of Little Rock to do joint efforts to pursue things for our residents, our tourists, and the workforce of the state's capital city. Today before you is sports facilities companies. They're going to do a presentation on sports complexes. As we all know, that's part of the sales tax. They're here today because this isn't the first time they've discussed it, because they've done now, there's been 2 to 3 sports studies that's happened over the past few years that were funded by the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau. And so this is just another update on what they've been funding on their side of the field, and we're very grateful for the work that they've done, they being Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau. Then we'll have Gina and then Leland, and then I think they'll be ready for the presentation.
Good evening, and thank you. Thank you so much, Mayor, and thank you, City Board, for your time this afternoon. Actually, it's not quite evening. As many of you that have been on the City Board for a couple of terms, you know it's been a priority of the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureaus to increase our sports facilities in the city of Little Rock. As many of you, Cappy and Joan, I know some of you have sat through Gretchen, my predecessor Gretchen Hall's presentations in the past, and is familiar with sports facilities companies and some of the work they've done for us in previous years. We're looking forward to, we do think this is very important to not just Little Rock for a visitor and attracting tournaments, but it's also a great benefit to our residents as well. So Leland, if you have anything you'd like to add before, okay. I will pass it now over to sports facilities companies. Evan?
And I think Director Couch has probably instructed you all to be as brief as possible. I mean, clearly we don't want you to speed through it, but we do have an agenda as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will be as quick as possible, if you wouldn't mind putting the presentation up. Board members, thank you for your time. Mr. Mayor, thank you for your time this afternoon. Evan Elef, I am a partner with Sports Facilities Companies. As was just alluded to, this is sort of the next step in this concept. We've had a few different rounds of feasibility studies and feasibility study updates, and now moving into project implementation for these concepts. And project implementation is really where everything starts to get more clarity, starts to evolve, sites are selected, exactly what is built, when it's built, and how it's built will all come to the forefront. And so today's presentation, I'm just going to give you an overview of the industry, of some other facilities to help you understand how this has been done in other locations, and then an overview of the indoor and the outdoor sports complexes as have been recommended to date that we're going to now start through this project implementation process. So I may need some help progressing slides here. This does not want to progress for me. There are a lot of slides, so bear with me. That it's going to get a little bit annoying, but I'll get through as quickly as possible. So just in general, the sports tourism industry has been a hot button topic for communities all over the country, and that is because sports tourism through the Great Recession and then through the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic and today has shown consistent growth. It is the only segment of the tourism industry that has been proven to be recession resistant, and that is simple because although this won't only be for kids, youth and amateur sports has continued to grow in terms of participation. People have continued to prioritize youth and amateur sports. And so today it's a $77 billion industry. It's actually north of that in a recent report that was just released. A huge portion of that coming from youth and amateur travel sports, which would be the primary focus of new facilities here in this market. If you wouldn't mind progressing, please. So the City of Little Rock, as the mayor just mentioned, in conjunction with the Convention and Visitors Bureaus and Leland Parks and Recreation and their teams have come together to really identify this opportunity and progress this opportunity. Next slide, please. And with that, you can actually just go to the next slide. I'll be brief here on several of these. We do want to be realistic about the challenge of an underserved market in terms of not currently having the opportunity to tap into the sports tourism industry, and also the fact that there is a race. Now is the time for you here in Arkansas. There have been a lot of facilities that have been built over the last decade across the country. A lot of those further east in the southeast and the Midwest is number 2. Right now, there's not that level of competition. There's not a level of saturation here in the state of Arkansas and in your immediate region. And I'll show you the region that we'd be drawing from. There is still competition and there will be future competition, but making decisions at this point as to whether or not to move forward with one or both or neither facility that we're going to discuss here shortly will be very important. Next slide, please. So just briefly, this is kind of the punchline. In terms of the indoor and the outdoor facility, as we have gone through and projected, we have a lot of different stats, a lot of different numbers, a lot of backup, and a lot of analysis that's gone into this. But ultimately, if you combine the indoor and the outdoor, by the time these facilities get to maturity, years 2, 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that range, bringing in at minimum, and this is a conservative number, over $38 million of new spending in hotels, restaurants, retail, entertainment, and transportation, and other service providers and businesses here throughout the community, but also being a great service to your local residents for local play and for local residents' participation in tournaments and events that happen throughout the year. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the region. Obviously, you know, when we look at a region, we look at where people drive from. And although, yes, these facilities will have the opportunity to draw national events and fly-in events and people who are coming not just from a drive. The most reliable drive time will be that 4 to 6 hour drive time. So you see, obviously, as you get out to 4 hours, you get into the Memphis market. Beyond that, Birmingham, Tulsa, Oklahoma City. These are all markets not only that are capable and would be willing major hubs for teams to travel into Little Rock from, but you're already pulling people from all of these markets on a regular basis here to the market because of what Little Rock already has to offer. So this will be in addition to the reasons that people come to Little Rock, and these concepts are, we think, very compelling for your consideration. Next slide, please. Just very briefly, as a company, this is what we do. We are experts in youth and amateur sports, recreation, wellness, events, and entertainment. That's a lot of different things, but basically, if it's going to get people active, we want to be part of it, and that's because we believe in the power of sports and recreation to transform communities, that not only the economic benefits, but also the health, social, safety, and educational benefits of getting people active. And so our 2,700 plus people across the community, across the company, and the 3,000 plus communities we've served, we've brought that mission and that vision to them to help them to understand how to better serve the residents and gain the benefit of all of those impacts of activity. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So today we actually manage 64 communities over the mostly in the east side of the country, but these range. They range from large tournament complexes all the way through seasonal water parks and pretty much everything in between. But again, if it's going to get people active, whether that's for learn to play soccer or a high-level soccer tournament, we want to be part of it. And of course, not just soccer, but any type of activity that fits into the sports, recreation, wellness category. Next slide, please. So just to run through a few of the examples that I think are important for you to understand as you start thinking about what a facility like this will do. I'll start here in Myrtle Beach. This facility was built and opened just under 10 years ago. Very first year, we projected that it would do about $13 million of economic impact. That's new direct spending in the market. And we had $30 million in the first year because not only do we have more events, but we also got some national events in that first year. Today, this facility, which is 100,000 square feet, 8 basketball courts, cross-arm with 16 volleyball courts, the same court setup generally as what we've recommended here. It does between $20 and $30 million, brings between $20 and $30 million of new spending every single year, and brings between 40 and 50,000, sometimes more than that, room nights per year to the market. Next. Another example is Rocky Top Sports World. This was actually built a year earlier, 10 years ago at this point, in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. So this is an 86,000 square foot indoor facility with 7 outdoor fields. And every single year, this facility brings in between $54 and $76 million worth of new spending to the market and eclipses 70,000 room nights annually from people who would not be in the market but for the tournaments and the events held at Rocky Top Sports World. Next. Hoover so this is the Hoover Met Complex, started as a stadium and then was built on with an indoor facility about 170,000 square feet, and then built a set of outdoor fields, there's an RV park that's there, built a tennis complex as well. And so that facility, built in 2017, brings in between $65 and $85 million of new spending. Again, just to put it in perspective, we've put 38.5 in front of you as a conservative estimate. You're seeing facilities that combined with their indoor and outdoor eclipse that every single year. We believe that's the opportunity for you, but we have taken a conservative approach here, and we are just backing this up with some real world, real-time information for you. Next slide, please. The Rocky Mount Event Center, which is interesting because it is a downtown redevelopment project built not just for sports tourism, but really to activate downtown. Not only does this do between $10 and $20 million of economic impact per year, but it's also spurred a tremendous amount of new development in the downtown area. A downtown that for 40 years it had effectively no investment, and this was a catalyst for residential, especially some low-income housing, as well as retail and hotels and whatnot. So next slide, please. Moving forward then, actually, I'll skip this one in the interest of time. I'm gonna very briefly talk about, one more please. Very briefly talk about the recommended facilities here, starting with the indoor facility. Now we do have an indoor model, an outdoor model. They work together if you decide to build them at the same time, co-locate them, or they can work separately and independently, be phased to build indoor first or outdoor first at separate locations, operated separately. Could be anything, but for today's discussion, just want to talk to you about the indoor facility. Next slide, please. So the indoor facility would, as I mentioned before, 8 basketball cross-line with 16 volleyball courts, but not just basketball and volleyball. This is a facility that will be available for all sorts of sports on flat floor indoor. So cheer, dance, gymnastics, wrestling. Also non-sports events. We host a ton of different events, consumer shows, trade shows, weddings at some of these venues as well. Various special events. So it's not just sports, but this facility between 125 and 150,000 square feet is the anticipated size, and that could change a little bit depending on location and partnerships, but that is the facility that we're talking about here for the indoor side. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned before, lots of key factors there. This facility, we think the top end of the price tag will be $60 million. There'll be ways to bring that down. There could be ways to bring it up if you wanted to spend more money on the indoor side. But bringing between 400 and 500,000 visitors per night and getting to a point where it's generating enough revenue to be operationally right around that break-even level. Now, that does not mean that it would cover debt service or capital improvement, but the trade-off for that is bringing, 20 or so million dollars worth of new spending on an annual basis. Next slide, please. So as you know, the indoor courts will be a feature, and yes, basketball, volleyball, I mentioned cheer, dance, gymnastics, a lot of other sports. Pickleball is a big sport, which probably many of you have heard about from your community members. But additionally, other components to make sure that this isn't just an athletics facility, but also a place that's really inviting for your local community and makes people want to come back and participate in a tournament again. So one of those areas, next slide please, would be a family entertainment center. So we like to have the fun factor, and whatever the appropriate fit of the fun factor is, sometimes that looks like bowling and arcades, other times that looks like golf simulators and other sports simulators, things that keep people very active, augmented reality, virtual reality, lots of different things, but to keep it fun and keep it not only for tournaments where big brother and little sister have a reason to come and spend time and frankly extend the stay, but also so that here at a local level, when it's not used for tournaments, whether that's a summer camp or a local recreation program, there are other reasons for the whole family to be there, even if they don't consider themselves to be an athlete or interested in sports. Next slide, please. And then we also look for partnerships, and those partnerships oftentimes, especially in indoor, in fact, in pretty much every community that we work in, we've got a major partnership in some way, shape, or form with a medical sector partner. So whether that's tenant space or representation in the facility, in-kind services, sponsorships, lots of different ways that we can bring in other components and bring more visitation to the facility and expand the services offered by the facility. Next slide, please. One more. So on the outdoor side, what we've really focused on here is flexibility. Next slide, please. So looking at synthetic turf fields, and those synthetic turf fields being a mix of diamond fields, but also rectangular fields, both of those types oversized so that we can actually run all types of sports on each of the fields. So on a baseball field, if you imagine a left field that's extended so that you can run a full-length soccer field in that same area, that means that yes, it's set up for baseball or softball at all ages, but also soccer and lacrosse, flag football, tackle football, as I mentioned before, ultimate frisbee, rugby, lots of other sports. All of those would be possible here on a synthetic turf system that is really attractive on a regional and super regional basis for people to come because they have confidence that they're going to be able to play on those fields regardless of what happened in the weather the week before. Next slide, please. I covered this, so we'll start to land the plane here. If you want to go one more slide, please. Sorry, one more. So one of the other factors, just to bring it full circle, one of the trends that we see right now, actually two trends that we see right now. The first, you're already checking the boxes on. That is the convergence of sports tourism and local recreation. Partnerships between CVBs and Parks and Recreation coming together because these assets are not just sports tourism and they are not just local recreation, but they should serve both. And when they serve both, they bring a volume of people, they bring a lot of spending and a lot of new money to the area. So oftentimes they catalyze mixed-use development. If you want to click to the next slide, please. Mixed-use development can oftentimes look like retail and hotels, as you see pictured here. Most of our facilities, either they are built in conjunction with a mixed-use development or they are, as I said, the catalyst to future mixed-use development. That Hoover complex, as I mentioned, has spurred several hotels, big mixed-use shopping centers, and really transformed that from a bedroom community outside of Birmingham to a destination that's got pretty much everything that a visitor would want to come in and participate in. Next slide, please. And then finally, I'm going to land the plane with community access because it is really important. It's easy to talk about the economic impact. It's easy to talk about visitors and serving visitors, drawing visitors in. But at the heart of all of this, it really has to serve your local residents on a daily basis. And that's what the community access portion is about here. Next slide, please. So with community access, we just believe that sport matters, that sport and recreation is a phenomenal way to get people active, to have them experience those health and educational and social and economic benefits that come from it. And to put that into perspective, next slide, please. A couple of different slides. Number one, there's a growing need. It is not any less expensive to do anything today than it was 2 years ago or 4 years ago or 5 years ago. Sport is a great example. Unfortunately, we are seeing people get left behind. When you don't have access to play tournaments in your own backyard, it is very expensive to travel for sports. And so lower income families are getting cut out of travel sports. People who would want to play competitively just don't have the opportunity if they have to travel 4 or 6 or 10 or 12 times out to different markets and spend on hotels and transportation and all of their away meals. So by bringing these tournaments into your local backyard, you'll be breaking down barriers to access for your residents, people who would not be able to play travel and competitive sports, but for this complex being in their backyard where they don't have to travel every single weekend to play. Next slide, please. And I'll wrap with this one. I keep mentioning those various benefits, but the impact of activity on a person's life is tremendous when you get them active. So if we can get more kids active by having more programs and better, more reliable places to play and progression so that they can play throughout their life, they will recognize and benefit from lifelong impacts. Kids who are active compared to their inactive peer counterparts, they are 1/10 as likely to be obese or overweight as their inactive peer counterparts. They earn higher test scores, they have higher graduation rates. As they go on to adulthood, they earn 7 to 8% more than their inactive peer counterparts. They have lower healthcare costs. And one of the really interesting factors, because we're not talking about a 5 or a 10-year facility, either one of these that gets built will be a 30, 40, 50-year asset in your community. There is a multi-generational and intergenerational benefit because kids who grow up active are almost 6 times as likely to be active adults and active adults are about twice as likely to have active kids themselves. So all of those benefits of activity that you see at childhood, through teen years, through early adulthood, and on through the rest of life, they compound and they build on each other as people not only start playing here, but their kids end up playing here as well. And so that's an overview of sort of the projects, the industry, a whole bunch of other information. I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got, but really want to appreciate your time and your support in taking this next step to go from the feasibility studies that have been completed into the now project implementation to find where, when, what, and how should be built here in Little Rock. Thank you.
Director Hines?
Thank you. Going back to some of these, because this raises some questions I've had, I'd love for you to send this presentation to us, and if I could have your personal contact to have
Absolutely.
some discussions offline, not trying to belabor the point. On the multi-use outdoor facilities, where were examples of that? Was Hoover one, or?
Hoover's got both. The best example of those flexible fields, look at the public sports complex in Panama City Beach. So that's one that we planned and managed. But that facility, in the way, so that CVB, where that tourism department, I guess it is there, does their own economic impact. But that is 12 outdoor fields and 4 overflow fields, generated $110 million of new spending in Panama City Beach last year.
It is Panama City, though, too.
That is correct. That is correct. And they did it because they were, getting rid of spring break and they needed to bring in more sports tourism to rent out their year. But yes.
I guess the other question, too, is, so you guys do operate facilities like this, and how do you guys do revenue share? Is it different by city?
They're all slightly different, but in general, our approach is to be a fee for service and kind of like an owner's rep. So we have a flat fee. There are some incentives, but what we don't want to do is take a % of revenue, because oftentimes revenue generation and economic impact work like this. So if we were incented to take a % of revenue, we might cut off economic impact in a year where you want more heads and beds because we want to make more money. So we charge a flat fee, and if you tell us in a quarter or the beginning of the year or halfway through the year or after 3 years that you want to change the goalposts in terms of what we're targeting, we don't want a conflict of interest with that. So we are a flat monthly fee with some incentives depending on the contract.
And then, I'm trying to think the last question I had. On your, I see your family entertainment, that's more a la Dave and Buster's, but you guys operate the same type operations?
We do. We do. Often integrated in there are much smaller, right? Dave & Buster's, full eatertainment, big restaurant, big footprint. These happen typically between 3,500 square feet and 20,000 square feet on the very large end for these. But Dave & Buster's is 40, 60, 80,000.
And in your previous, in the proposal, when you were talking about a 55 to 70 acre development, does that acreage include the out parcels for hotels and those ancillary mixed uses?
No, those are the acreage requirements for the
Facility itself?
Yeah, the playing assets.
Okay. All right. And that's, as we look at location of this and trying to find land in the western part of the city, flat topography that doesn't have to move a mountain to be done. And what I've heard on the gives and takes is that you need to build it someplace where you've got other facilities or ability to build them, or nobody wants to stay. So.
Yeah, you really want to be within a 10 to 15 minute max drive of the majority of the hotels people are going to stay at. So if that means
And
that
I think it's
new would
kind
need
of
to be built.
crucial that you have those out parcels where the city can either do a ground lease or something like we do with our downtown hotels. May make more sense. Thank you for that input, and I look forward to getting your contact info.
Makes sense. Thank you very much.
Vice Mayor Webb?
Thank you, Mayor Scott. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the fact that we had an opportunity to visit for a few minutes before the meeting. Based on Director Hines' question, and one of the things that popped up on the slides that I would just ask you to explain a little bit more. On the Myrtle Beach and Gatlinburg and Hoover and some of those, it said that there was an operations subsidy from the city.
Yeah, in some cases. In Hoover, there is not. Hoover cash flows and contributes money to the bottom line to then go into new capital improvement and expansion. Some of those facilities, depending on where they're built, depending on how they're programmed, they do require an operational subsidy in exchange for the tournaments and the events. But, keep in mind, Gatlinburg has about 3,500 people in the entire city. And so when you've got an 86,000 square foot indoor facility, it's hard to program that on a Tuesday and have it be full. So it depends on the market and on the, on the opportunities and the partnerships and what gets programmed. Typically a goal for a lot of these facilities is to be at that operational break-even point so that it can cover its own expenses. And that is certainly an opportunity here with these assets in this market.
Thank you.
Director Peck?
Thank you, and thanks so much for the presentation. And you may or may not be able to answer this. I think I've been hearing about sports complexes for about 20 years. I served on the A&P Commission for 12, and that was a regular topic of discussion, and here it is 20 years later, and we're still talking about it. So my question is, we have seen surrounding communities like Benton and Bryant, North Little Rock, Jacksonville, Cabot, Conway, take advantage of this huge economic impact. I mean, you can't argue with the numbers. I know it's the fastest growing part of tourism. I know it's recession proof. I know all of this. With all of these other municipalities now right around Little Rock, what's going to happen? Are you still projecting those kind of numbers? I mean, it just seems like they have built it, so people are going there. Are we too late to the game?
No, we don't believe that you're too late to the game. We factored that in. So as I mentioned, the aggregate of those is sub $40 million in the projections that we put in. We do not expect that you'll be able to bring in a tournament 52 weekends per year because you're the only game in town, if you will. So we factor that in, not only for existing developments, but also planned future developments and a level of conservative projections within that. And so we are not here to tell you, yes, you should build this, or no, you should not build this. We're here to tell you what is safe and reliable if you build it. That $38 million indoor-outdoor combined is conservative. We think there's great potential to exceed that. And if it wasn't at that level, if it was much lower than that level, we would probably not be standing in this room because it wouldn't be as compelling. But certainly have to be mindful of competition. You have to look at how you're going to add to and reduce competition with other communities, right? Cabot with 6 courts going in. If you build 8 courts and they've got 6 courts, working together to bring in a national event that needs more courts than almost anywhere that's not a convention center would have in close proximity might be an opportunity. And so that as this continues to evolve and grow, it needs to be a focus of the conversations and the planning.
Okay, that addresses it. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Peck, and I'm glad you asked that question because many folks even read today's Arkansas Business, different things that are coming on from that timeline. Everyone is trying to take advantage of sports tourism, and we see that it's a $77 billion. I don't know many things that's producing, and also looking at the business case that's giving us 38.4 in a conservative standpoint, million as a revenue generator with the city. I do know what we've been able to see, even looking at the STAR development and how they were able to work with different municipalities between the Dallas and the Frisco area, how fruitful that's been outside of it being the STAR development, being associated with Jerry Jones, but what it's really done for the community access standpoint with high school sports. And so I'm really excited. A few things for the board members to understand. Part of the downtown master plan is tied to this because one of the key things is how do we bring more people to downtown Little Rock. This helps from a downtown development, destination travel, and as he shared, yes, there are other organizations and folks that are around us, but no one is doing the things that we're doing with this particular development because it truly is destination. And so really excited about the work and the business case that's been addressed here. And again, 38.4 million in revenue. But to the case of Director Hines, I think, one, this is a situation where really the city employees don't need to be in this business, clearly from the standpoint of the contracting, but really allow them to manage that process as long as we have the purview on the community access standpoint, which we'll never give away, because we want to make certain that our residents have full access and different things to do. So thank you all. I really do appreciate you. All right, members of the board, we'll now go to the consent agenda. Any questions on items 1 through 14? Director Adcock, and then Director Peck, is your hand still up from earlier?
No, it's new.
Now? It's new? New hand. Director Adcock?
Mine starts with 12.
Excuse me?
Mine starts with number 12.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry. Do you want to, you have questions for, you are correct, I apologize, you did get that. What's your question for, let me make sure, Director Peck, what's your question? Item 9? We'll start with 9, and then we'll go to your questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just a little bit confused. The Terry House, I know that there was a lawsuit pending, not sure what the status is, but back several years ago when this came into the public view because of some articles in the paper, I know that we had planned and paid for an architectural study on what would be needed to bring it into a safe place.
Correct.
Tommy James did this. So I'm wondering what happened to that study and where are we and why are we doing this now?
So at this point in time, alongside our city attorney, who's also still, there is an active discussion with their attorneys right now. So I want to be very clear that I share that. But this is to continue to make upgrades to it. At this point, it's still ours. We're making upgrades to it based on those previous studies. This city board approved in the budget line item $500,000, which we also offered to them to help get things together. This money is coming out of that pot of money. I believe we got about $300,000 left. So we're spending money to get it up to code in hopes that they will take it over.
So I guess, do you know if, and I know all the principals, but I would think that Witzel Evans Marasco would be working with Tommy and he would share his report and we wouldn't have to maybe do as an exhaustive of a survey since we did that a few years ago? Or are they working?
I know we're operating from the plans to move it up to code. All that communication, don't know that particular answer, but we have architect, we have things that need to be fixed. That's what we're working on at this point in time.
That's all. I was just kind of surprised to see it back on there. So
Yes,
thank you.
ma'am. Next, is anyone, someone just, hold on one second, Director Hines, what's your number before?
On this one we're discussing.
All right. Yes, sir.
So I guess if we're talking about a $500,000 project we've got reserved, it seems I'd like a little further detail on what we're getting for the architectural services and design services. $120,000 on a $500,000 spend seems a little exorbitant. Most of as I recall, the architect's fees run 8 to 15%. It's been a minute. This seems a little high. I'd like a little further detail on what we're getting for the $120,000 since we've only got a $500,000 budget. This seems a bit high.
Leland's here.
And Mr. Mayor, Sean Carpenter from our office is here as well as Mr. Couch. Overton, yes. Changing names.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Board members. Director Hines, you're correct. So the subtotal for the services is $34,000. There's an $85,000 for services for full architectural drawings based on that analysis to bring it up to code. So if they have to go forward, they have 85 grand in there to do up to $1 million renovation to bring it to code. So realistically, it's the 34, and then we went on and did the 85 for the architectural drawings up to $1 million renovation.
Okay. It always concerns me when we've got a kicker in there that once we approve this, we've got no oversight on whether or not it comes back to us.
And definitely understand that concern, Director Hines, but that's, I would say that's also what we are hiring the architect to represent us, but totally get where you're coming from. Director Miller, is yours within 1 through 9?
Yeah. 13?
Or we're going to answer that through Director Adcock's questions.
Okay.
All right. Director Hines, is your hand still up? All right. All right, Director, Director Adcock has questions on 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, and 18.
Okay, number 12. We are doing a improvement district, improvement drainage project for $81,000, but we're hiring a lawn service to do it.
We'll ask Mr. Honeywell if you'll be there and stand there for questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Adcock, that just happens to be the name of this company. They're actually a contractor construction company that's done this work for us previously or similar type work. So that just happens to be their name. That's somewhat misleading, but they are a licensed contractor to do this kind of work for the state.
Well, $81,000, usually a drainage improvement costs a lot more than that. So what type of drainage improvement is it?
It's not an extensive project. That's why it's not that much. It's already a curb and guttered street, but there's some low spots that we have to do some additional drainage work to try to capture that water and drain it to where it's ponding in the streets.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, on number 13, this is saying neighborhood safety programs. Is this our youth programs? Because no place on this does it say youth. So is this our youth programs that we are redoing, or what type of program is a neighborhood safety program?
Yes, Director Adcock, it is for youth, and Dana Doucette is here and should be able to answer more detailed questions.
Can you tell me why we've changed the name of it and why this does not state youth in it?
We'll get that answer for you.
We're talking about the neighborhood safety programs.
What item are you on? Sorry, I had to step out.
And the question was, why did we change the name from our youth programs to a neighborhood safety program, and it no longer states youth in the resolution?
We will get that. I'm sure there's a reason why, but we don't know. We'll get that to you. Director Doucette's not here right now.
Okay, and then my next ones are on number 14. Can you explain?
And I'll say I'm pretty certain these particular, and I'm just going, again, Director Doucette will be here. I'm pretty certain these are from the, back to number 13. I'm pretty certain these are from the Office of Neighborhood Safety, in which administered those American Rescue Plan Act dollars that mirrored what we did with the work that we did for community violence reduction back in 22. And so where we had about $2 million, and essentially these same organizations that received that pot of money and were successful. For instance, one was UAMS, who basically sent a team of social workers after a young person would be shot. There was some wraparound services for those young people after they exited the hospital system. That all came from the Office of Neighborhood Safety, which administered, after the city board voted and said yes to the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. These same organizations, because the American Rescue Plan Act are no longer there, these same organizations are applying for community program dollars, and they're just calling it neighborhood safety programs.
Which department is now called neighborhood safety?
Community programs, which has always been that way.
Community programs?
Yes, ma'am. So this is just it's coming from the same pot of money. They're just identifying that way. I'm about 98.9% certain that's what it is.
Okay, and on number 14, can you?
Did that answer your question?
On that one, yes.
Okay.
On number 14, can you explain that one, please?
Yes, ma'am.
What costs are associated?
Oh, this is, no, I got it. This is the city board through, as well as the residents, and through also advocacy through Director Phillips as well as Director Campiris, identified dollars within the Renew Little Rock bonds to help revive the river market, the actual river market. And so again, we'll come before you again. Little Rock Convention Visitors Bureau as well as the city have been working together on that. And so there's about $4 million in Renew Little Rock bonds for the river market because the river market is a part of our parks process, which you all voted to be a part of that as well. Thirdly, now there's some pre-development cost that has to be done, separate and aside from the $4 million that's in the Renew Little Rock bonds. And this is the pre-development cost to do that work that you all already voted on.
And this is part of that $4 million.
Oh, it's part of $4 million.
Yes.
My correction. Thank you. So you all voted for this is what I'm trying to convey.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, uh-huh.
All right, so we answered 12, 13, and 14. Okay. 16?
Item number 16 is under separate items.
All right, did you have something between 1 through 14, Director Miller?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
number 13, and you may have addressed some of that, but I'm familiar with 3 of these organizations. I'm not familiar with McMahon, and T. Rich. Is there anybody?
I'm not, again, every organization, I don't believe each one were a part of the original ones in 22, but again, I would say I'm fairly certain that this as well, just like our normal process, it goes through CYF as a recommendation and then comes before the city board, in which there'll always be some new people from time to time. So, but I'm not aware of McMahon or T. Rich, as you initially said, unless I get some more names.
Yeah, I guess someone from that office, when they're here, they can probably tell us what that is.
We'll have that answer to you before next Tuesday.
That's
And I do know
perfect.
McMahon is counseling. It's counseling services.
Counseling, parents, youth, both, what?
Potentially both, but certainly youth. And we'll get more details to you.
Okay, that's fine. And then on 14, you may have also talked a little bit about this, but has a site drawing been put together on this with this due diligence? Where are we with this, the planning? And is this part of the downtown master plan?
Yes.
Part of this too?
So a number of different things just to walk through everyone. This is part of the $4 million that you've already approved. We got to get some work started because there's also a bid process from Little Rock Convention Visitors Bureau process to move things forward that we'll have to procure an actual company to redevelop and or manage for the residents. So is there a site plan today? No. This is to start that process.
And I would just add, Mayor, to Director Mills' point, it does coincide with the master plan about the redevelopment of the River Market area and particularly the hall. But to the mayor's point, this is just to get started so CVB can do what they need to do on their end to get the work going.
And then lastly, again, part of the plan, if you all recall in the sales tax, to really take it to the next level, we got some additional money in there as well that'll be married to this $4 million. Director Adcock, you said 16?
No, 16, 17, and 18.
What's your question?
I would like for Mr. Howard to come next week and talk about this so that we can make sure that this is different from what we've got and that it's going to cover all the problems that we have. And I would like to have a copy of this program.
So 2 different things. Mr. Howard will always come to your request. He's here today, can answer any questions that you may have. Secondly, the written copy is the ordinance that was provided by Ms. Perez and Mr. Overton, who can speak to anything from a legal standpoint and working with City Director Phillips. And so most questions may be directed towards City Director Phillips because he helped devise it with the city attorneys as well as in consult with Director Howard. So to make certain that we're taking the best use of the city board's time, we have everyone here.
Well, I really want to see the difference in what we've got and what Director Phillips has suggested, because I live in the community where most of these houses, these apartment complexes are.
So Director Howard, if you'll just give us a brief overview, if there's a need to do a red line, we'll do that as well.
And also, I want to know if there's additional costs and who is going to pay the cost. If it's going to be collected from the owners of these properties.
And we'll answer that question as well.
Okay.
And Mayor, just if I may, before Director Howard responds to Director Adcock's question, I know Ashley has some handouts because number 18, 16 and 17 were on the website on Friday. Number 18 was added today. So that in the event that my colleagues didn't get a copy to look at number 18, we have handouts for you for number 18.
And while Ashley's doing that, before Director Howard, Director Hines, what's your question on what number are you on?
I guess just the, kind of along the lines of Director Adcock, I'd like to see if we've got a red line version of stuff we're deleting and we're adding, or if this is all new additions to the current
Yes, sir.
code. I'd just like to see, get a copy of that red line
Yes, sir.
so we can tell what the differences are. That's usually a better indicator than the clean ordinance.
Yes, sir. Director Howard?
Yes, good afternoon. I think Sean probably can answer a lot more questions as far as the redlining and Attorney Lynette Perez regarding what's being taken out and what's being added. As far as resolution number 18, some of the things that we'll be bringing before you all on a quarterly basis are those structures that or properties that we're having issues with as far as rental inspections that do not get the work done in a timely fashion. And then also the unsafe and vacant structures. What we did add the unsafe and vacant structures that are in these areas that are nuisance due to the condition of the structures. And so that gives us an option to go in and do some work to these structures. Now, one thing that we will need, and I addressed this with Director Phillips, is additional money to deal with these structures once that we see that they're in a condition of disrepair and the owners are not, they're absentee owners and they're not doing anything to these structures, because we're continuing to use resources to take care of these properties as far as cutting cleans. And a lot of times they go into court and we cannot address these issues as far as these nuisances we see that are the structures that are unsafe and vacant. So this gives us an option to go in, bring these properties before the board, because these structures are in a situation where they're not to a point where we can condemn those structures, but we can go in and do some work to them, make them look good, and possibly sell those properties or get our money back as far as what we put into those properties to make them look a lot better in those areas, and we can sell them to a possible new homeowner once we get them into our inventory. Does anybody have any additional questions for me?
I have one additional question. On
Yes, sir.
item 17, it references the tenants' rights on the cities. Can we have a copy of what we're publishing? Because I look at the ordinance, it doesn't have the actual document we're going to be publishing. I think that would be appropriate to have it listed as to what, we know what we're approving to be published if it's ready.
And I can respond to that, Director Hines. So, and again, just for kind of big picture of all this, this is a continuation of the discussions that we've had about tenants' rights for, maybe a year now. And this is the fruit of that labor. As it relates to number 17, the idea is to create a user-friendly document based exactly of what's listed, in the ordinance. So the language in the ordinance, tenants' rights, Article 10, ideally will be added to, not ideally if it's passed, it's not ideally, it will be added to Little Rock Code, and then those sections will be available on a separate site, a separate link on the city's website, listed tenant rights. The idea behind that is if you're a tenant in the city of Little Rock and you want to know whether your living conditions meet Little Rock Code, instead of you having to thumb through the Little Rock Code to find the right section, we'll have an easy to find, user-friendly section on the website where you can go and say, I live in this apartment. I know under Little Rock City Code, I'm entitled to pest extermination. And that'll be a one-pager instead of them having to dig through the code. So we're not changing the law in that sense. It's just allowing it to be published on the city website so tenants can find it.
No, I fully understand that, but before I vote on to pass a resolution that says we're going to publish something, I'd like to see what we're publishing. That's what I'm saying. Do we have that document available, or is it still in development?
That document has not been created, but it's the same language in the ordinance. So what it looks like hadn't been created, but if you're suggesting we get that document created,
I'm not willing to vote on it unless the document's actually been created.
and that's, as a lawyer, I understand that. I'm just telling you, it's the same language of the ordinance, but I understand your concern, and
I
I'll
get
work
that,
with
but
staff.
this is a separate resolution. I mean,
Yeah.
I get that. You're requesting a document be published, and I want to know, it may be what's in our ordinances, but it's in a different form than our ordinances.
I understand. I'll work with staff this week to make sure it's available before we vote next Tuesday.
Kevin, I agree. I want to see a comparison to what we have to make sure some of the problems that we've had recently in Southwest is going to be covered by the new ones. That we're just not going to take time and just add a few. We need to go ahead and really make a difference if we're going to make a difference.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And Mayor, if I could call Mr. Overton to the podium. Mr. Overton.
That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Adcock.
And I appreciate Director Adcock and Director Hines' concern, but as it relates to resolution number 18, which concerns Arkansas Code 1454-904, I want to first publicly thank you for the hard work in getting this done and figuring out you helped me get where I wanted to get, even though you said this may not be the road you want to go down to get there, but ultimately I think we get there. So if you would kind of explain to the board and the community what this resolution would allow the city to do legally as it is towards landlords.
I appreciate those kind words, Director Phillips, but it was truly a joint effort. And I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I do want to share a statistic to the board. I looked up in the city of Little Rock, 45% of our homeowners in the city of Little Rock are renters. In the state of Arkansas, 38.21. So we have more renters in the city of Little Rock than anywhere else in the state of Arkansas. And up until 2021, we were the only state that did not have an implied warranty of habitability. So this is an important project, and I was glad to be a part of the team, Director Phillips. In regards to this resolution, we are going to go on a voyage that no other city in the state of Arkansas has gone on. And that is, we're going to look at structures and determine if we want to make repairs, file liens on them, and then foreclose, or have the property owner pay off the lien. And so this ordinance isn't granting the city the ability to do anything that it doesn't have the ability to do. It's just letting people know that we have the ability to do it. And I know this is something that's also important to Director Adcock, Director Miller, because we talk about this once a month at the land bank meetings. And so we've talked about repairing structures and bringing them up to code, but this ordinance is really going to focus on that effort. It's going to require the Department of Housing on a quarterly basis to bring properties to the board so y'all consider whether or not y'all want to prepare them and then file a lien.
Thank you, Mr. Overton, and I think when I drafted my version of this, it was with the idea that we had a stick in place for these landlords to say, hey, if you don't take care of the tenants, then there will be consequences. And I appreciate your guys and the guidance of the city attorney's office to say, we can get there, and this is how we get there. There's a mechanism already in place for us to get there, where now if a landlord doesn't meet building code, if they're not having a habitable place as is listed under the Little Rock Code for tenants to live in, that now we have something, and we're going to use that something to enforce. And what you just said is important to me, that we're the capital city and we're the first one to do it, and that's how it should be.
Yes,
we
sir.
should be leading the way in the state of Arkansas on protecting tenants, and I'm happy to say that we're going to be the first one to do it, and we're going to do right by people in the city of Little Rock. And I think this is a tool to help us get there. So I appreciate your leadership on it. And hopefully we get this passed next week. And ideally, we won't need to use it, right? Ideally, landlords say, hey, I don't want to get sued. I don't want to have to pay attorney's fees. I don't want to have to pay repair costs. I don't want to have my property foreclosed upon. So I'm going to do right by my tenants. That's the goal of this. But if they don't do right, then we have the stick from the city standpoint to enforce it and protect our tenants' rights. So I think we're going in the right direction, and I appreciate your leadership on that.
Thank you, sir.
Director Wyrick.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Phillips, thank you for putting this together for us. You and I had quite a conversation today. I appreciate you calling me and visiting with me. It's pretty shocking to know that 45% of the residents in Little Rock are renters. I knew the number was high, but I think that's the first time I've ever seen that it's 45%, and then comparing that to the state of Arkansas. So that's a lot. And so we have people that are moving in and out of structures and really not knowing what the rules are, what they're supposed to get, who they're supposed to speak to about getting things done. And I hope that this will help. But one of the things that Director Phillips and I talked about today was we've tried to deal with this situation for a number of years. And a number of years back, we developed this CAP program. And I never can remember what the acronym stands for, but it's...
Civil abatement program.
Okay. It's a group of individuals from within the city. It's the police department, it's zoning, planning, all facets of our organization come together, and they look at crime reports, they look at statistics, and I think they do it on a weekly basis. Is that right, Emily, or every 2 weeks?
Twice a month, yes, ma'am.
Twice a month, every 2 weeks. And so does this in any way incorporate the work that this CAP program's doing? Does this help them? Does it aid them? Is that CAP program doing what it should be doing? I don't ever see reports from them. I don't know.
So I'm sorry, I apologize.
They get all the information in regards to housing in the city and what's going on. So is the CAP program doing what it needs to do in tackling some of these rental issues that we have or problems we have in the city? And does this help them in their efforts? Do we need to beef up the CAP program? Does it need to look differently? What should we think about in regards to that?
Director Wyrick, and I'll jump in there, Mayor, because you and I did talk about this, and I've discussed it with Director Howard and Assistant City Attorney, Ms. Overton, and I'll let him respond on how this would coincide with the CAP.
Okay.
In regards to the CAP program, Director Wyrick, the CAP program, it's kind of difficult. It's a great ideal, but when you talk about criminal abatement program, the business that's operating and illegal activities that are actually occurring on the business owner has to be kind of engaged in it, conspiring with the people that are actually doing the criminal activity on the property. We could probably tie it in if properties on the CAP program are not up to code, which is kind of separate from a criminal violation.
I'm assuming that we know that in the CAP program. Is that
Yeah.
not a part of the CAP program?
We can certainly look at the properties, determining if they're up to minimum code, and if not.
Mr. Overton, I'm gonna be very clear, I'm gonna cut in, I'm sorry. Just to be very clear, in the CAP program, as Mr. Overton shared, is about mainly criminal issues, not necessarily habitability issues. Now, there are sometimes that you find habitability issues in the criminal issues. I'm gonna be very clear. If that was the case, the criminal abatement program would be meeting every week. But we don't have that particular type of capacity to do it from that standpoint. What I would share is that this is complementing something else as what the CAP program is doing. Again, it's really comparing apples to oranges, but it is adding a complement to it, because when they're meeting, I'll give you a great example. There is a certain gas station / food mart in the South End, Wright Avenue area. It was a part of the criminal abatement program. It took years to get that issue cleaned up. That's what we're dealing with day to day on the criminal abatement program. It's not, every now and then we'll deal with certain apartment complexes, but that's not the majority of it. It's true criminal abatement issues, and we leverage. So I just want to be very clear from that standpoint. So this adds to that.
Okay. So we do have apartments that are being addressed in the CAP program, but it's just the criminal aspect of it. It's not the condition of the apartments.
It's a yes and a no. So I'm not going to. My point is, it's a criminal abatement program. It's not a habitability abatement program.
Okay. If it's a yes or no, then there's a possibility that this would help with the criminal abatement program.
And that's what I just shared. This will complement it.
Okay.
And I can share a little bit more on that.
Okay,
And the mayor is correct. We do meet, so housing is a part of the CAP meeting too as well. And so when we get information from the police, so we're sitting there when we're going through the meeting and we address those issues. So at that time period, we will let the city city manager know at that point that we will be going out doing rental inspection on those units. And sometimes we're already there. It's just the reporting comes every 2 weeks. So we do address those issues during that time period, but it is a complement too as well. But like Director Phillips said, this is already in place. It just adds a little bit more teeth for us in ordinance number 18.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Hines?
Yeah, so one other question to our three attorneys in the room. This is very specific language. It says MF18, MF24 multifamily districts, but we find that we've got a lot of multifamily that's in PRDs, C1, C2, and C3. And in fact, Big Country is an R5 zoning. So how do we deal with these outliers? And then why don't we include MF12 under that 18 and 24? Again, this kind of goes to...
That's a great point, Director Hines. When I met with the planning director to discuss this, I was trying to focus this effort on the actors. You're right, there are some that fall outside that. I have no problem applying different zoning if that's a recommendation by you or the board. The idea was just to make it focused on those bigger issues. So if it's your recommendation to add to it, I have no problem
I'm just
with
questioning, is the actual zoning the best vehicle to delineate these, or do we need to have a more general term? There may be, that's why I'm asking you, you attorneys in the room. I just get to play part-time attorney because I'm a city director. Unlicensed part-time attorney.
When we looked at it, and I'll defer to Attorney Perez or Attorney Overton, the idea was just to make it focus. I don't think there's a limitation on which zoning designation can be used in the ordinance and who it applies to, but I'll defer to the two of you if y'all think differently.
Go ahead, Sean.
Director Hines, you're absolutely correct. We didn't capture everything, but this isn't the final document. I can coordinate with Kevin and Jamie, and we can expand the definition to include all the zoning designations to make sure that we cover all of our bases, and then we will get those changes over to the board. In incorporating these changes, we may, well, I'm going to step off. I will get with Jamie and Kevin, and we will look to possibly increase the designations.
I mean, because we're talking about one of the biggest offenders isn't even met in Big Country Chateau, doesn't even meet the language. So I think that gets back to what, Director, I think if we want to put this into practice, we want to make sure we've covered all our bases, especially where our biggest offenders are concerned.
And I appreciate that, Director Hines. I think no opposition from me. That's why we have the agenda meeting to talk about these things. So I appreciate that perspective. I don't have the authority to appoint him as temporary authority. He has to go to the State Bar of Arkansas to get that designation.
Yes. We need to know the costs of this. You know, lots of times we have real good programs and real good ideas, and then we get a few years down the line and we don't want to fund it. One thing I'm talking about is right now we have 247 properties that's got structures on them that needs to be torn down. And we're kind of holding up because of the costs involved. We also have 294 vacant lots that we've taken structures off of. When we started the land bank, the idea was that we would take these structures off if they could not be repaired, and then we would file the liens and everything, and they would go into the land bank. Well, now we've decided that costs too much money, so we're not doing that like we should be. The land bank has gotten down to 36 properties, which means that most of these properties cannot be built on. On these that has buildings on them, we need to look at different groups that might want to go in there, and some of the homeless people, take this property, if you can bring it back up and everything, and give it to them. But we do good things, but we don't look at the costs, and then when the cost starts coming up, we pull back from doing them. So I would like to know, Sean, on what you're looking at this, 16, 17, 18, to do this like we want to do it, and like Director Phillips says it needs to be done. What is the additional cost that we're going to look at? Because I don't want to hear that the liens cost us too much money. We don't want to do the background on all the heirs of this property. We go to land bank meeting, and time again, we can't do anything. We don't have properties, but we don't have properties because we can't fund what it takes. So I want to know when we start looking at 16 and 17 and 18, that we are going to have the money to do what we need to do.
Understood. I think the ordinance dealing with the tenants' rights bill, that's not going to cost anything. The resolution dealing with putting the tenants' rights on the website, city's website, to promote and educate our tenants within the city of Little Rock, it's not going to cost us anything. In regards to the bringing to the board properties that could potentially be repaired, that cost is going to be determined at the time that it's sent to the board and inspection will be done. An estimate of what it would cost to repair the structure. Obviously, the noticing requirements, you'd have to do title work, that's $250. And then ultimately, it would be up to the board what the cost would be. But you'd be willing to repair the structure and bring it up to code and then file the lien. So the costs are unknown, really.
So Director Adcock, very good answer. And if Director Howard wants to come up and add anything too, just like you all, each time we demolish, there's a certain amount, there's a budget in place for the demolitions. To my knowledge, I don't think money is an issue. We haven't expended to the exact amount of the demolitions at this point in time to increase that budget. Many times when there's something still on the list, it has a lot to do with the tenant fighting to keep it off the list. Sometimes tenants reach out to you all. They may be on the list, and then we magically take them off the list. And then they still sometimes are working to get things done. They're still looking that way because it takes them time. So it's really a board decision. If we want to take something down, we can take something down. I don't think there's been ever really an issue there. And if we get to the point where we're maxing out the demolition budget, I don't see this board declining not to increase those dollars if those are funds available at the time. Director Howard?
Yeah, so it's two different things that we're looking at too as well as far as Resolution 18. One dealing with properties that are multifamily. Those properties would be the ones that if we had a gas leak on the structure and the actual owners or the landlords of the property did not want to fix it in a timely fashion once we issued a notice. Once the notice is issued, instead of going into court and issuing a citation to these landlords, we would go ahead and bring it to you all and possibly get the work done prior to going into court. So we're gonna have the 30-day notice or the 60-day, and we put people in hotels. That's what we're trying to avoid right now. Similar to Big Country Chateau that we had the issues, Bradford Estates, just naming those because we discussed those prior to. We had tenants that didn't have a place to go. The landlords didn't fix the property, so now we're back to square one. No work has been done. They're in court. We have citation issue. They've been in court for over a year and nothing has happened. So we bring it to you all make a decision on, okay, go ahead and fix the gas. That way the tenants can get back in their homes, and then we don't have any issues as far as with building codes, any issues with code enforcement as far as life safety items. We can get those things done and they can get in. Then the second part of it, unsafe and vacant structures that we do not bring to you all for condemnation. These are structures that we feel like that we can fix, that wouldn't be a nuisance to the area, that we can address some of those absentee owners that we see the properties are just dilapidated. They're not doing anything to those structures that are not over that barrier that we could bring them for condemnation so we could get those structures fixed. Now, what we do when we put them on the unsafe and vacant list, we do go out and do inspections, and we bring a report to you all to say how much it would cost as far as the estimate. We do use a software we call Housing Developer Pro that our officers go out to the structures and they make an estimate based on what the repairs would cost to get it done, to bring it back up to building code standards. And so we would bring that to you all, and then you all would make a decision on if we're going to expend funds to rehab that structure.
Kevin, sometimes we make the decision to tear it down, but then whenever I look at 247 more properties that need to be tore down, and when I talk to you about it, it's about the money.
Yes.
We need to, if we are going to really do this on housing, we need to put some money in it.
I agree. We currently, the city doesn't have any general funds to do housing currently right now. I know the mayor has it in the sales tax, but we do not have any funding currently right now to address housing. Most of the funding that we receive from the city comes from the federal government. And so the community development is completely funded by the federal government as far as addressing affordable housing, owner-occupied rehab, public service grants. All that comes from the federal government under CDBG Home, HOPWA. And as a matter of fact, item number 2 on the agenda addresses that because we're submitting sources and uses to the federal government so we can receive the funding for fiscal year 2024.
I would like for you to bring to us a list of what money you would need for us to really get under this and do something about it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And thank you, Director
Mayor.
Miller, for your advocacy on the inclusion of housing and the sales tax, as well as your advocacy as well, Director Adcock. It's about $10 million in the sales tax for it. All right.
Mayor, I have just one more thing. On item 15, it's a temporary entertainment district. We've found a couple of typos in our haste to get this on in time for their date. We found a couple of errors, so we'll fix those before next week. But the intent is just a temporary one-day for Juneteenth.
All right. Director Wire, is your hand still up?
No, sir. Sorry.
All right. Director Hines, your hand still up? Director Adcock, is your hand?
Mine is down.
Oh, you just took it down.
I'm faster than you.
We need you to talk to Director Miller about how to utilize it. All right. Seeing no other questions, meeting adjourned.